Thank you. Please.
An idea of what you think the Obama administration should and can do in terms of Russia, and particularly about anti-ballistic missile systems in near their territory?
Well, the question of the anti-ballistic missile systems it's a very good question, and obviously the administration is now taking a second look at this. The Russians have a neuralgia about having anti-missile systems on their borders because they think they are very provocative and are intended to entirely eliminate any threat from Russian missiles and remove, in effect, their power, part of their power base. And when, under the Bush administration, the notion was put forward about putting these anti-missile bases into Eastern Europe, but the argument was, the Bush administration argued, they're not about Russia, they're about Iran and places to the south. We're trying to protect Europe from potential rogue missiles coming in from rogue states in the Middle East. And the Russians said, are you crazy? Why are they on our border? Well, both sides had a point, right? And it's not stupid to put, to figure out ways to make sure the bear doesn't get out of his cage again. That's not a dumb policy. There's a lot of strength in that. But it was a huge irritant. I'd say more than an irritant, and the U.S.-Russian relations. Well, so along comes the Obama administration, and they say, Joe Biden, as you know, was just in Munich a few days ago, and said we're willing, the Obama administration is willing to take another look at that whole question. And then Iran sends up a missile, to do a missile test on the 30th anniversary, and the people said, the conservatives all said, we told you so, you need to protect against the Iranians, look at what they're doing, they're closing in, Ahmadinejad's crazy, he's going to get a nuclear weapon, and so forth and so on. And of course, this is a big issue, a huge issue in Israel. I don't know how we're going to come out on that particular issue. It does seem to me that it ought to be done within the context, a much broader context of how do we build a much more constructive relationship with Russia than we now have. Recognizing up front that President Putin strikes most people as a thug, and that he is a menacing figure to many in the West. And he has done things that have encouraged people to believe Russia has gotten to be, has too much crime, it has too much repression, it's too authoritarian, and it's got a lot of the KGB elements. Now, he's got his defenders here and so forth and so on, but the issue for us is, rather than trying to demonize him, which is easy to do, is to see if, in fact, we can engage in a broad set of conversations that include the anti-missile issue, but that also include Ukraine and Georgia, that include, we have a base in Kyrgyzstan. The Kyrgyzstan just announced yesterday they want to close that base down. That base has been very important to us to getting into Afghanistan. It's thought that the Russians got the Kyrgyzstan. It was announced when the Kyrgyzstan minister was in Moscow, and it's thought that the Russians got him to do that and paid him to do that. Well, we've got those issues about the periphery of Russia that are very important to everybody. And we've got other issues about the energy supplies of Russia and whether they're going to try to hold Europe hostage with those energy supplies. If they're going to cut the supply lines on and off. And if Europe continues to become more and more dependent upon Russian energy, then the Russians actually have more influence in Europe than they did when they had military forces at the border, because they can squeeze them. You don't do what we say, we'll cut your oil off. We'll cut your heating oil off this winter. You go freeze, see how you like it. So we've got a lot of issues, and by the way, we need the Russians on a couple of things. We could use the Russians' help not only in Afghanistan, but we could use the Russians' help in Iran. Russia can be very, very helpful to us in negotiating with Iran and trying to defang that, just as China has been helpful with us with the North Korea. So it seems to me what we should not do is go in with ideological blinders on and just have a sense of, okay, we have to see them as the enemy. It's too easy to make an enemy of them, just as it's too easy to make China the future enemy. I think we ought to see, let's explore whether we can have a much more constructive relationship, one that everybody backs down a little bit from some of the hard lines they've taken. Let's do that quietly. Let's not make a big thing of testing their muscularity or their masculinity. Let's do it with some quiet diplomacy and see where we can get. And maybe we can come to a much more constructive relationship. In the last 2 or 3 years, the relationship with Russia and Europe and the United States has soured. And we need to get it back into a better place. We've got enough problems to worry about without having the Russians become a real problem for us again. I hope that's responsive.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yes, sir, please. There are microphones. I guess I'm not sure there's one in the balcony, but if there may be one up there, I can't see, but sir, you've got the microphone.
You spoke of the level of bipartisanship being 3 out of 219.
So, three out of 219, right?
Yes. Do you think people are putting country first or politics first? And could Obama be doing something different, something he hasn't done?
Are they putting country first or
Politics
first? Well, look, I think it's too early to become very judgmental about what each side is doing. I could sit here and tell you, yeah, more of them ought to have voted for the package, which I believe he should have, and I'd hope his package would get more votes.
I just wondered if the bill is that badly flawed in your estimation.
I think that the process was flawed. The process by which you get people to sit down, have a genuine give and take. In retrospect, here's essentially what happened. Is I can put it together, and to be fair, I probably ought to do some more reporting on it because I may get this wrong. But here's my understanding of it so far, and that is that Barack Obama during the campaign put forward a lot of positions, which he wanted to see enacted into law. And essentially, the White House pulled together a summation of those positions as they applied to the stimulus, might apply to a stimulus package. And they gave them to the House Democrats, and Congressman Obey, who runs one of the big committees there, has been there for a long time, sat there, took the Obama stuff and got materials from a lot of other Democrats and put together a comprehensive bill. And in that process, the Republicans were not invited into the table. They were not invited there to share in ownership of the bill. And they were quite angry about it. Now, the Democrats in the House feel, wait a minute, first of all, we won the election. And therefore, we represent the majority. Why should we have to bring you in? Secondly, this is the way you used to treat us when you were in the majority. You always put a stick in our eye. And you ran over us on more than one occasion. And thirdly, these are things we've been believing in for a long, long time. This is our opportunity to get a lot of things passed without waiting. Now, the Democrats, there's been a fear on this stimulus package. If you don't get your favorite program into the stimulus package, you may not get it passed, because once the stimulus package is gets enacted, there may not be any money left for some of these new bills. And Congress is going to change the rules by which you get things done. Right now, there's something that's a little complex, but there's something called, last year what the Congress did, and what has been a good idea and has been done from time to time, is if you want to pass something that costs $100 million, then you either have to cancel $100 million somewhere else, or you have to find $100 million in new revenue. Pay as you go. Called pay-go. Pay as you go. Well, the stimulus package is not being subjected to that rule. They don't have to find $800 billion to make up for what they're doing. It's being waived in. But the view is, as soon as you get the stimulus package done, they're going to put a pay-go rule into place that from now on, if you've got a favorite program, you're going to have to pay for it with some other funds. That makes it a lot harder to get it passed, right? I happen to be for national service. I really wanted to see a national service element in this bill. I thought it was very worthwhile, like to rebuild the CCC. Some of us wanted that in the stimulus package. It's not in there, and now we're fearful it won't get enacted. Well, that was the mood in the House among Democrats. So they put a lot of stuff in there, and the Republicans felt, what about our stuff? What about the stuff we object to? Or what about, this is supposed to be a stimulus package for the next 2 years. You got a lot of stuff that's not going to kick in 3, 4, 5, 6 years. This isn't what you said. You're hiding a lot of stuff. Yeah, you're saying there are no earmarks, but you put all the earmarks inside the bill. So I think the Republicans had a legitimate argument that they were not fully consulted, but you can also see it from Obie or Nancy Pelosi's point of view. It's a different perspective. And so now Nancy Pelosi is angry because when I went over to the Senate, after they'd done all this work, some of this stuff got tossed out without her participation. And some of it got tossed out because Republicans insisted in the Senate that as a price of voting for this, you've got to toss this out. And the Democrats in the House feel really angry now. There was $40 billion in there of money for state and local governments, some of which was going to come to North Carolina, that was in the House bill. It was part of a much bigger package for state and local that got excised in the Senate. Nancy wants it back. But you got 3 Republican senators saying, you put all that stuff back in, we're not voting for it. You don't get our vote, you don't pass the bill. So that's what they're playing. It's a treacherous place. But you know something, it's a little bit, watching this legislation is a little bit like watching sausage get made. Sometimes you just want to see the end product. Watching it get made is not edifying, please.
Thank you so much for being here.
Sure.
The United States is heavily in debt to China, and we're going to get even more in debt. What can go right and what can go wrong?
Okay, let me just, that's a very good question. By my watch, it's about, I may be wrong, about 6 or 8 past 7, is that right? We're gonna go about four more minutes. I've been warned upon penalty of death that unless I get off of here close to 7:15, before 7:15, I won't get any supper, and you're not gonna have a happy time. So we're not gonna be able to get to everybody, that's all I'm saying, but I definitely wanna get to you. On China, look, we've got a short-term problem and a long-term problem. Our short-term problem is we got to get the economy back on track, and we have to borrow to do that. And we're gonna have to drive up the national debt. There's no question about it. We did this, as Paul Krugman would argue. Hey, we did this back in World War II, and the Depression in World War II. What ended the Depression was World War II, which was in some ways the greatest public works project in history of man. And it helped us jolt us out of it. But in doing that, we got the level of debt up to around 60, 70% of GDP, of gross domestic product. We're now by around 40. His argument is you can get up to 50, 60, 70% in order to get yourself out of it, and then you work yourself out of that over time. But we got to get through this the short term. That is going to put us more heavily in the hock with China. Long term, we have to start unwinding the debt with China, and that means we have to get our savings rate way up. Our personal savings rate has to go up. It's been flat to negative recently. We have to, so we're not as dependent upon them. We create more capital pool here. We've got to get them to buy more in China and not just depend on exports to us, which is what they've been doing a lot of. And that's why the U.S. government is trying to encourage them to get a more of a consumer movement going in China. It's been very hard to get them. It's hard to get Americans to save. It's hard to get Chinese to not save. And we have to be much more competitive. We just have to be on the cutting edge. That's why our universities are so darn essential. You've got a PhD program here in the sciences. That's a really important program to keep building, keep growing, because innovation and entrepreneurship is what's going to save us in the end. And a good education system. That's what's going to make us more competitive. But I want to get to this point. This is dangerous for us, not just economically dependent on the Chinese, because they can always stop buying. As and there's some indications that they're slowing down on that. But the other thing is it gives them more power. We have gone from the greatest creditor nation in the world to the biggest debtor nation in the world. And your power, you lose power when you do that. Someone explained this to me not long ago, and it really helped me understand, because I had forgotten this. Back in 1956, when we were the greatest creditor nation in the world, the Egyptians tried to nationalize the Suez Canal, and you'll recall the Israelis and got together with the Brits and the French and did a surprise attack. And Britain and France both went in on the side of the Israelis. And it really upset President Eisenhower, who did not want the Brits and the French and didn't want a war in there. He didn't want them in there. And they did it without saying, by the way, this is what we're going to do. He was really angry with them. What had happened, we were their creditor, the Brits and the French. And so the White House, President Eisenhower called the Brits and French and said, you get yourselves out of there or we're cutting you off financially. And guess what? They got out. That's the problem we have with China now. Increasingly, they're going to be able to put pressure on us on geopolitical terms, and that's none of us wants to be in that situation. That's why I think we have to break out of this box we're getting ourselves into, because the box is getting bigger and thicker by the year, and this recession we're going through is not helping. It's going to make that debt much higher. But we have no choice to get it now. But I think on the other end of this, we've got to become a society that believes in thrift once again, believes in savings, and sort of cuts back on this sense that the answer to everything is go shopping. You know, that's not who we are historically. Thank you, please. And then I want to get one woman here. Yeah, please.
Sir, in regard to the presidency, of all of our presidents, which do you deem to have the most defining impact upon the presidency itself? And do you see the innate qualities of that leader in the millennium generation?
Well, historians, I think, generally agree that the three presidents they put in the pantheon were George Washington, Lincoln, and Franklin Roosevelt. You could argue about some of the rest, but they all had an enormous impact. I mean, had it not been for Washington, we would not have had a republic. Lincoln saved the republic, and in many ways, Roosevelt saved us in the Depression and World War II. Were they all the same? No, they had somewhat different qualities, but what I think they did have that the millennial generation, I think, shows signs of, is the millennial generation, one of the things I really like about the young people coming along today is it's not a generation as torn by partisanship and by sort of self-servingness. I see a lot of people in the millennium generation who are willing to volunteer on behalf of the country, who want to spend time volunteering on campus and eagerly line up to do things like Teach for America, as I mentioned, or many, many other organizations like that. We've got thousands upon thousands of young people serving today, and thousands more would serve if we would ask them and provide opportunities for them to serve. I think your generation has the opportunity, and I take it you're part of this, I think your generation has the opportunity to be the next great generation. I really do. I think there are all the earmarks of that, and I think it's going to require a lot of leadership. It's going to require a lot of self-initiative on your part. But I think we in the older generations ought to be very supportive of you, helping to open doors, encouraging, and providing incentives through reduced tuitions and things like that to serve. I think that's profoundly in our interest. And I will guarantee you, if you and your friends can mostly, if you give back to the country a year or two of your life between the ages of 18 and 25 or something like that, I guarantee you, you'll become much more civic-minded and you'll be great guardians of the Republic the rest of your lives. And it'll be a wonderful thing for the country. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think it's there.
To end our evening. David Gergen, you have been amazing eyewitness to power, and we deeply thank you for your insights and, more importantly, for your call for all of us to be the kind of responsible citizens that we should be. Once again, please join me in thanking David Gergen. David will appear tonight on Anderson Cooper 360 at 10 o'clock from Winston-Salem, so if you want to see more of his insights. Thank you and good night.